News. This morning, President Trump posted on Iran saying, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." What's your message to Trump, and do you believe this rhetoric?
The first is that Canada expects all parties in this conflict, in any conflict, to respect international laws, the rules of engagement, and that means not targeting certainly civilians or civilian infrastructure. And we urge all parties in this war to follow those responsibilities. It's a point we've made publicly and privately.
A whole civilization will die tonight. That is not a military briefing. That is not a classified assessment. That is the President of the United States on social media describing what he intends to do to an entire civilization. And a reporter walked straight up to Mark Carney and asked him, "What is your message to Trump?" What followed was not a diplomatic dodge. It was not careful political non-speak. It was a sitting prime minister drawing a line, live, that Trump's language had just crossed. And the fact that it was said in Brampton, Ontario, not at the United Nations, not at a NATO summit, makes it more significant, not less, because this is Canada saying directly to its closest neighbor, there are limits, and you are crossing them publicly and privately. That detail matters because it tells you this is not a performance. This is not Carney playing to a domestic audience or generating a headline. The message has been delivered behind closed doors as well. And what he is describing, the expectation that all parties respect international law, rules of engagement, and the protection of civilians, is the foundational architecture of everything that separates modern warfare from annihilation. Trump just casually referenced annihilation. And Carney just said, no, stay with this. Because what happened in that room today is the clearest example yet of how two completely different leadership philosophies are now colliding in public, on camera, with the entire world watching.
There is I'll just observe that there are some negotiations going on, and that there is often a gap between what's said publicly and what's happening privately. We are not at the center of those negotiations, although we have some visibility to them. However they unfold in the coming hours, in the coming days, the coming weeks, those negotiations, those discussions, those movements, as it must towards a cessation of hostilities and a reestablishment of security and peace in the region, those international responsibilities, those humanitarian responsibilities remain for all parties throughout that.
A gap between what's said publicly and what's happening privately. That line is doing more work than it appears to, because Carney is simultaneously doing three things at once. He is calling out Trump's rhetoric as something that does not reflect the full reality of what is happening diplomatically. He is signaling that Canada has visibility into negotiations that are not publicly known. And he is reminding every party in that conflict, including the United States, that humanitarian responsibilities do not pause because negotiations are underway. They remain throughout for all parties. That is not a soft statement. That is a structured, deliberate, and direct warning. Here's the full breakdown of everything that happened today and why the contrast between what Trump said and how Carney responded tells you something much deeper about where this is all heading. Start with the statement itself. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. Posted on social media by the President of the United States about Iran. This is not a figure of speech. This is not rhetorical hyperbole that can be waved away. Under international law, specifically the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Statute governing crimes against humanity, language that anticipates, endorses, or calls for the destruction of a civilian population is not just inflammatory. It is a legal threshold, and Trump just stepped directly onto it. The statement was made in the context of ongoing military operations in Iran, operations that have already killed over 3,400 Iranian civilians and military personnel, operations where a missing U.S. airman is still being searched for in enemy territory, operations where an A-10 Warthog has crashed, where 2 U.S. helicopters have been hit by hostile fire. Into that context, Trump posted that a civilization would die tonight. And Carney was asked on camera on what Canada says to that. His answer was the most important diplomatic statement Canada has made in this conflict so far. Here is where most coverage gets this wrong. Carney's response is being described as measured, diplomatic, careful, and on the surface, yes. He did not raise his voice. He did not use Trump's name. He did not escalate the emotional register of the exchange. But measured does not mean mild. What Carney did was structurally significant in a way that requires unpacking. He placed Canada's expectation that all parties respect international law and avoid targeting civilians as a universal standard. All parties, not Iran, not Israel, not unnamed adversaries, all parties, which means the United States, which means the president who just said a whole civilization would die tonight. He is explicitly included in the standard Canada is publicly affirming. That is not mild. That is a direct accountability statement, delivered without a raised voice, without a dramatic confrontation, without giving Trump the argument he prefers, and the emotional, reactive, visible escalation that he can dismiss as partisan noise. Carney gave him something much harder to dismiss, a principle applied universally, stated clearly, delivered calmly, and it landed because of what it didn't do, not because of what it did. Go back to that line. There is often a gap between what's said publicly and what's happening privately. This is the most significant disclosure in the entire statement, because Carney is not just commenting on Trump's rhetoric. He is signaling that the rhetoric and the reality are not the same thing, which means one of two things. Either Trump's civilization-ending language is performative, designed for domestic consumption, for markets, for pressure, and does not reflect actual military orders. Or there are negotiations happening that are far more advanced than the public statement suggests. And Trump's social media posts are being used as coercive pressure within a diplomatic process that Canada has partial visibility into. Either way, Carney is telling the world, do not take the words at face value. And that is a remarkable thing for a sitting prime minister to say publicly about the President of the United States. It is not antagonistic. It is not a direct challenge. But it is an unmistakable signal that Canada is watching, that Canada has information, and that Canada will not pretend that what is being said is the whole truth. And then, in the same day, in the same city, Carney launched the Build Communities Strong Fund, a $51 billion investment in community infrastructure across Canada. Hospitals, rapid transit, community centers, housing infrastructure, funded across three streams: provincial, direct delivery, and community, designed to work across multiple levels of government and leverage additional private investment. And the contrast between those two moments happening on the same day is the contrast that defines this entire political moment. On one side, a president posting that a civilization will die tonight. On the other, a prime minister announcing $51 billion to build hospitals so parents don't have to drive 2 hours when their child is sick, rapid transit to cut commutes in half, community centers where kids can play safely on the weekend. Two leaders, same news cycle, completely different definitions of what power is for. And the people watching, not just in Canada, but in every country trying to figure out which model of leadership they want to align with, are drawing their own conclusions. Step back, because this is not an isolated press conference moment. This is part of a pattern that has been building for over a year. Every time Trump applied pressure, Canada built something. Every time Trump used language that crossed a line, Canada drew one. Washington chose escalation, structure, and the cumulative effect of that pattern, measured in polling numbers and trade partnerships and defense investments in the approaching majority threshold, is a Canada that is more confident, more diversified, and more strategically independent than it was when the pressure began. Trump tried to destabilize Canada. What he actually did was clarify it. Clarify what it stands for, clarify who leads it, clarify what kind of country it intends to be in a world where the old rules are being tested. And today, in Brampton, when a reporter asked what Canada's message to Trump was after he said a whole civilization would die tonight, Carney's answer was the clearest expression yet of what that clarification looks like. Respect international law, protect civilians, follow the rules, all parties, including you. That is not a diplomatic statement. That is a warning, delivered calmly, publicly, and on the record. Subscribe to Canada Today for sharp analysis of every development as this unfolds. Because the moments that define leadership are rarely the loudest ones in the room. They are the clearest. And if you find this helpful, hit like, subscribe, hit the bell,